Marcus wiped the grease from his hands onto his already stained work pants, surveying the dimly lit repair bay of Station Theta 9 with tired eyes. The frontier outpost sat on the edge of civilized space, a waypoint for traders, mercenaries, and the occasional military patrol passing through the disputed territories. For 3 years, Marcus had made his living here as a general mechanic, fixing everything from atmospheric processors to weapon systems. Asking few questions and expecting little thanks, the woman had appeared in his workshop just after the second moon rose, her armor scorched and cracked along the left pauldron. She stood barely over 5 feet tall, with silver hair tied back in a functional braid and eyes that held the weight of countless battles. Her armor bore no insignia Marcus recognized, just abstract patterns etched into the dark metal that seemed to shift in the flickering overhead lights. "Can you fix this?" she had asked, her voice quiet, but carrying an unmistakable edge of command. Marcus had nodded, gesturing to his workbench. He had seen his share of battle-worn soldiers, and something about her bearing suggested she was accustomed to getting what she wanted. Still, credits were credits, and the damage looked straightforward enough. She had removed the damaged pauldron with practiced efficiency, revealing an underlying layer of crystalline circuitry unlike anything Marcus had encountered in his 15 years working with galactic tech. The crystal lattice pulsed with a faint blue light, fractured in 3 places where whatever had hit her had penetrated deep. "This is Valtorian work," Marcus had muttered, more to himself than to her, running his fingers along the edge of the crystal matrix. Valtorian technology was rare, the product of a civilization that had mastered energy manipulation centuries before humanity had even left Earth. Most of their artifacts were locked away in museums or private collections, far too valuable and complex for field repair. The woman had said nothing. Merely watching him with those unervingly calm eyes, Marcus had set to work, pulling out his finest tools and a small reserve of synthetic crystal he kept for special occasions. The repair required absolute precision, realigning the energy pathways and grafting new crystal structure to bridge the gaps. His hands moved with the confidence born of decades of experience, adjusting the molecular resonance, frequency, and checking the power flow at each junction. 3 hours passed in focused silence. The woman sat on a cargo crate nearby, never speaking, never fidgeting, simply existing in that patient way that made Marcus increasingly certain she was military. Probably special operations, given the quality of her gear dot when he finally powered up the pauldron. The crystal matrix flared to life with a steady azure glow, the energy flowing smoothly through the repaired pathways. Marcus allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. It was some of his best work. "Done," he said, turning to face her. "The structural integrity is back to about 98% of original. The crystal grafting should hold through standard combat scenarios, though I would not recommend taking a direct hit from plasma artillery in the same spot." The woman had stood, crossing to the workbench with fluid grace. She lifted the pauldron, examining it with expert eyes, testing the connections and flexing the articulation points. Then she had looked up at Marcus, and for the first time, something like genuine warmth had entered her expression. "This is exceptional work," she said. "Few people outside the Valtorian homeworld could have managed this repair." "You have my thanks, mechanic?" Marcus had shrugged, uncomfortable with praise as always. "Just doing my job. That will be 2,000 credits." She had paid without hesitation, transferring the funds from a credit chip that briefly flashed a security clearance level Marcus had only seen once before, on a Galactic Council inspector. He had decided not to mention it. The woman had reattached her pauldron, the armor sealing with a soft hiss as the systems integrated. She had nodded once to Marcus, a gesture of respect between professionals, and turned toward the door. That should have been the end of it, But as she reached the entrance to his workshop, the bay doors had suddenly opened, and a group of armed soldiers had poured in, at least 20 of them, wearing the distinctive crimson and gold armor of the Imperial Guard. Marcus had frozen, his mind racing through every illegal modification he might have made recently, every gray market park he had installed, wondering which one had finally caught up with him. The soldiers had moved with military precision, forming 2 perfect lines leading from the door to where the woman stood. An officer had entered last, his armor more ornate than the others, medals gleaming on his chest plate dot, and then, to Marcus's complete bewilderment, every single soldier had dropped 1 knee, heads bowed, fists pressed to their hearts in a salute Marcus recognized from history books as reserved for the highest ranks of galactic nobility. The officer had spoken, his voice resonating through the workshop. "Your Highness, the perimeter is secure. The attack on your convoy has been fully repelled. Your transport stands ready." Marcus had felt the blood drain from his face. "Your Highness." The woman, this warrior who had sat patiently in his workshop for 3 hours while he repaired her armor, who had paid him without complaint, turned back to look at him. Something like amusement flickered in her eyes. "I apologize for the deception, Marcus," she said, and the fact that she knew his name sent another jolt through him. Circumstances required discretion. The officer had looked up, confusion crossing his features as he noticed Marcus for the first time. "Your Highness, this civilian has seen you. Protocol dictates that we must detain him for security questioning." The woman had raised 1 hand, a simple gesture that carried absolute authority. "This civilian just performed a field repair on Voltorian crystal, matrix armor that most royal engineers would have declared impossible outside a specialized laboratory. He asked no questions, demanded no explanations, and conducted himself with professionalism and skill." She had paused, her gaze still locked on Marcus's shocked face. "He will be detained by no one." "But Your Highness," the officer had pressed, "the security risk is mine to assess," she had said, her voice dropping to a temperature that could have frozen hydrogen. "Are you questioning my judgment, Commander?" The officer had paled, bowing deeper. "No, Your Highness." "Of course not." She had turned back to Marcus, who stood rooted to the spot, his mind struggling to process the situation. "I am Elena Voltoria, 3rd of the Crystal Throne, Marshal of the Outer Fleets, and Shield of the 7 Systems. My convoy was ambushed 6 hours ago by Separatist forces. Most of my guard were killed in the initial attack, and I was forced to evade through the station's lower levels until I could reach a defensible position." Marcus had found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "You could have told me, could I?" Elena had asked, tilting her head slightly. "Would you have worked the same way, with the same focus, if you had known who I was? Or would you have been nervous, second-guessing every decision, afraid of making a mistake that might have political consequences?" She had been right, and they both knew it. Marcus would have been terrified, his hands shaking too badly to perform the delicate crystal work. "I needed a skilled mechanic, not a starstruck citizen," Elena had continued, "and you provided exactly what was required. For that, you have not only my thanks but my respect, which I assure you is far more rarely given." The soldiers had remained kneeling, waiting for their princess's command. Marcus had noticed that several of them bore fresh wounds, their armor scorched and dented. The ambush she mentioned had clearly been serious. "What happens now?" Marcus had asked. Elena had smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her face from merely beautiful to radiant. "Now, I return to my ship and continue my mission. The Separatists sought to prevent me from reaching the treaty negotiations on Praxis 7. They failed." She had gestured to her repaired pauldron. "Thanks in part to your work. This armor has saved my life more times than I can count. You have ensured it will continue to do so." She had reached into a compartment on her belt and withdrawn a small medallion, pressing it into Marcus's hand before he could protest. The metal was warm to the touch, inscribed with the same shifting patterns that decorated her armor. "This is a token of the Crystal Throne," Elena had said. "Should you ever find yourself in need of assistance, present this to any Imperial authority. They will render whatever aid you require, no questions asked." She had paused, her expression turning serious. "Use it wisely. It can be employed only once." Marcus had stared at the medallion, its weight far greater than its physical mass suggested. "I don't want any trouble," he had said quietly. "I just fix things." "I know," Elena had replied. "That is precisely why I trust you with this." She had stepped back, nodding to her guard. "Rise." The soldiers had stood as one, falling into formation around their princess. Elena had given Marcus one final nod, a gesture between equals despite the vast gulf between their stations, and walked out into the station corridor, her guard surrounding her in a protective formation. Marcus had stood alone in his workshop long after they left, the medallion heavy in his palm, the hum of station machinery the only sound. He had fixed armor for a princess, possibly prevented an interstellar incident, and earned the respect of someone who commanded fleets. And all he had